They laughed. Not loudly, but loud enough. 3 young Marines stood behind the old man, eyes fixed on the rifle in his hands. Scratched wood, faded metal, a weapon that looked like it belonged in a museum, not a modern shooting range. "Does that thing even work?" one whispered. The veteran said nothing. His hands were steady, too steady for someone his age. The wind shifted. The target stood far away, farther than most would dare to shoot. The instructor hesitated. The Marines smirked. Then the old man raised the rifle. In that moment, the laughter died. No hesitation, no rush, just patience carved by decades of war. His finger tightened, slowly. The shot rang out, and when the dust settled, every Marine stood frozen, because that single shot didn't just hit the target. It shattered their arrogance. The sun hung low over the desert range, casting long shadows across the cracked earth. The air smelled of dust and gun oil, familiar scents for anyone who had spent time in uniform. The young Marines stood in a loose line, relaxed, confident, too confident. Training had come easy to them. New weapons, new technology, digital scopes that calculated distance and wind in seconds. Then the old man stepped forward. He didn't wear medals on his chest. No rank insignia, just a faded jacket and boots that had seen better days. His back was slightly bent, but his eyes were sharp, dangerously sharp. In his hands was a rifle that looked older than the Marines themselves. The wood was worn smooth, the metal dulled by time. One Marine leaned toward another and smirked. "Is this some kind of joke?" Another chuckled. "That rifle belongs in a museum." The instructor heard them, but said nothing. He watched the veteran carefully. There was something about the way the old man stood. His feet were placed perfectly. His breathing was controlled. This was not a man guessing what to do. The veteran approached the firing line slowly, every step measured. He didn't rush. He didn't ask questions. When he reached the line, he stopped and looked at the distant target, a small circle barely visible against the sand. The Marines exchanged looks. That distance was challenging even with modern rifles. The veteran rested the rifle against his shoulder. Not stiff, not forced, natural, like muscle memory waking up after a long sleep. His finger rested outside the trigger guard. Discipline burned into him decades ago. The wind picked up slightly. One Marine whispered, "He won't even get close." The veteran exhaled. His mind wasn't on the Marines. It wasn't on their laughter. It was somewhere else, another desert, another time, another war where missing meant dying, where hesitation cost lives. The instructor raised his hand, signaling permission to fire. The old man didn't move immediately. Seconds passed. The Marines grew impatient. Then he adjusted his stance by an inch. And everything changed. The rifle settled into the veteran's shoulder as if it had never left. The weight was familiar, comforting. To the Marines watching, it looked awkward, outdated. To him, it was an old friend. He tilted his head slightly, lining up the iron sights with a patience that seemed almost unnatural in a world obsessed with speed. The wind shifted again, a light crosswind from the right. The Marines didn't notice. They were focused on the rifle, on his age, on the quiet confidence they couldn't understand. The veteran noticed everything. He adjusted his grip, not by thought, but by instinct. Decades ago, an instructor had drilled it into him. Feel the rifle. Don't fight it. His breathing slowed. Inhale through the nose. Hold. Exhale halfway. Pause. The desert fell silent. Even the Marines stopped whispering, not because they believed in him, but because something in the air had changed. The instructor's eyes narrowed. He'd seen many shooters over the years. Good ones, average ones, reckless ones. But this was different. This was control. The veteran's finger moved to the trigger. No jerking, no rush, just steady pressure like pulling back the string of a bow. For a brief moment, time seemed to stretch. Then, crack. The sound of the rifle echoed across the range, sharper and louder than anyone expected from such an old weapon. Dust jumped from the ground near the target. One Marine scoffed. "Mississippi." Another nodded, already turning away. But the instructor didn't move. He kept his eyes locked downrange, binoculars rising slowly to his face. His expression changed, first confusion, then disbelief. He lowered the binoculars and looked back at the veteran, as if trying to match the man with what he'd just seen. "Hold," the instructor said quietly. The Marines froze. "What?" one asked. "Hold your positions." The veteran lowered the rifle calmly and rested it against his leg. His face showed no pride, no tension, only calm, as if he already knew the result. The instructor walked downrange alone. Each step felt heavier than the last. The Marines watched from behind, their earlier confidence slowly draining away. From a distance, the target looked untouched. Up close, it told a different story. The bullet had punched clean through the center ring. Not just a hit, a perfect shot. The kind shooters train years to achieve. The kind that required understanding wind, distance, drop, and timing without any digital help. The instructor swallowed. When he returned, the range felt different. Quieter, smaller. He raised the target for everyone to see. Silence exploded across the Marines' faces. One Marine's mouth fell open. Another shook his head slowly, refusing to believe it. The one who had laughed first felt heat rise to his ears. "That's impossible," someone whispered. The instructor turned to the veteran. "Center mass. Clean shot." The old man nodded once. Felt right. The Marine stared at him now, not at the rifle. At him. The age lines on his face no longer looked like weakness. They looked like history, like survival. "Permission to ask a question, sir?" one Marine finally said. The veteran looked at him. "Go ahead. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" The old man glanced back at the desert, eyes distant. Places where missing meant someone didn't come home. No one laughed. No one spoke. Because in that moment, the Marines understood something no manual could teach them. Experience doesn't expire. The wind moved gently across the range, carrying with it a silence heavier than any command. The Marines stood straighter now. No whispers, no smirks, just attention. The veteran hadn't raised his voice or demanded respect, but he had earned it with a single shot. The instructor cleared his throat, reset the line. The Marines moved quickly, almost instinctively, as if trying to correct something inside themselves. Magazines were checked. Stances tightened. I stayed forward. Yet, every few seconds, someone glanced toward the old man. He remained where he was, rifle resting calmly at his side, eyes following the horizon. To him, this was nothing new. The silence after a shot like that always felt the same. In war, it usually meant something worse was coming. One Marine finally stepped forward, the youngest of the group. His confidence was gone, replaced by curiosity and something close to humility. "Sir," he said, voice steady but respectful, "would you watch my shot?" The veteran turned slowly, studying the Marine the way a craftsman studies a tool, not to judge, but to understand. He nodded once. "Show me how you were taught." The Marine took position. Modern rifle, advanced optics, everything designed to make shooting easier. He followed procedure exactly as drilled. Feet planted, rifle up, breath controlled, but his hands trembled. The veteran noticed immediately. "You're fighting the rifle," he said softly. The Marine frowned. "Sir, you don't trust it. Or yourself." The Marine swallowed and tried again. The shot rang out, clean, fast. Missed by inches. Frustration flashed across the Marine's face. "I adjusted for wind." "You adjusted too late," the veteran replied. "You reacted instead of listening." The Marines leaned in, hanging on every word. The veteran stepped closer, not crossing the line, not taking control, just close enough to guide. Before Scopes did the thinking, he said, "We learned to feel the air. Watch the dust, the grass, even the heat." He pointed toward the range. "That wind didn't change suddenly. You did." The Marine nodded slowly. Again, the veteran said. This time, the Marine paused. He breathed. He waited. The impatience that had ruled him earlier softened. The shot fired. Closer. The veteran allowed himself the smallest smile. Better. The instructor watched silently. He realized this wasn't just marksmanship being taught. It was mindset. Something missing from manuals and simulators. One Marine asked, "Sir, were you scared?" Back then, the veteran didn't answer immediately. "Yes," he finally said. Every time, the Marines exchanged looks, surprised. Fear keeps you honest, the veteran continued. But arrogance gets people killed. That sentence hit harder than any lecture. The Marines remembered their laughter, their jokes, the way they had dismissed the man in front of them. Shame crept in, not crushing but corrective. The instructor stepped forward. "Sir," he said, voice firm, "would you be willing to stay a while?" The veteran considered it. He looked at the Marines, not as children, not as fools, but as soldiers still being shaped. "I can stay," he said, "if you're willing to learn." "Yes, sir," they replied together. As the session continued, shots echoed across the desert. Some hit, some missed, but something had changed. The Marines were no longer trying to prove themselves. They were trying to understand. And the veteran watched, correcting gently, guiding quietly. He wasn't there to show off. He was there to pass something on. Because wars may change, weapons may evolve, but the fundamentals, the ones that keep you alive, never do. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of morning coolness. Sweat darkened the Marines' uniforms, but none of them complained. Training usually meant repetition, and commands shouted across the range. Today felt different, slower, heavier, more meaningful. The veteran sat on an ammo crate a few steps behind the firing line, his rifle resting against his knee. He watched without interrupting, eyes sharp, noticing small details others missed. A foot placed too far forward, a shoulder too tense, a breath taken too fast. Between shots, he spoke quietly. "You rush your breathing," he told one Marine. "You lock your elbows," he told another. Each correction was precise. No wasted words. The Marines absorbed everything. They adjusted, fired again, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, improved. Hits became tighter. Misses grew smaller. During a break, one Marine offered the veteran a bottle of water. "Sir." The veteran accepted it with a nod. "Thank you." Another Marine hesitated, then spoke. "Sir, why keep using that rifle? You've earned better." The veteran looked down at the worn wood, his thumb tracing a faded mark near the stock. "This one taught me discipline," he said. "New rifles forgive mistakes. This one never did." The Marines understood immediately. A sudden gust of wind swept across the range, kicking up sand. Targets swayed slightly. The instructor checked the weather, considering calling a pause. The veteran shook his head. "Let them shoot." "But the wind," the instructor began. "They need to learn it," the veteran replied. The Marines took position again. This time, no one complained. They studied the dust, the grass, the way heat shimmered near the ground. They waited longer before firing. When they shot, their confidence came not from equipment, but from judgment. One Marine hit dead center. He looked back, eyes wide. The veteran nodded once. Approval enough. As the session continued, stories surfaced, not long speeches, just fragments from the veteran's past. A frozen ridge, a dark alley, a shot taken to protect someone else. "Back then," he said quietly, "we didn't shoot to be impressive. We shot to end a moment before it ended us." The words lingered. The Marines realized something uncomfortable. They had trained for performance, not consequence. Today, they were being taught responsibility. Toward the afternoon, the instructor gathered the unit. "Final exercise," he announced. "One shot each. No optics assistance." Murmurs spread, but no protests. One by one, the Marines stepped up. Some missed, some hit, all learned. Finally, the instructor turned to the veteran. "Sir, would you honor us with the last shot?" The Marines watched in silence. The veteran stood slowly, joints protesting quietly. He took his place at the line, just as he had earlier. Same stance, same calm. The target was reset, slightly farther this time. He raised the rifle. No one breathed. The shot rang out. The hit was clean. Not perfect, but honest. The veteran lowered the rifle and handed it to the instructor. "Take care of them," he said. "They'll carry what you give them." The instructor nodded, understanding the weight of the words. As the veteran walked away from the range, the Marines stood at attention, not because they were ordered to, but because respect demanded it. They no longer saw an old man with an outdated rifle. They saw a soldier who had survived long enough to teach them how. The veteran walked slowly toward the edge of the range, the sound of boots and distant shots fading behind him. His back ached, his hands trembled just enough now that the work was done. Age always collected its price afterward, but his mind was clear. Behind him, the Marines remained standing at attention. The instructor noticed first. He hadn't ordered it. No signal had been given. Still, every Marine stood straight, eyes forward, rifles held with care. Respect had replaced pride. The veteran paused and turned back. "You did good today," he said. The words meant more than any medal. One Marine, the same one who had laughed at the beginning, stepped forward. His jaw tightened before he spoke. "Sir, I owe you an apology." The veteran studied him carefully. Not harshly, not kindly. Honestly. "For what?" he asked. "For thinking experience gets old," the Marine replied. The veteran nodded slowly. "That mistake cost lives. Learn it here, so you don't learn it out there." The Marine swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." The instructor approached, extending his hand. "You reminded them what this uniform means." The veteran shook it firmly. "No," he said. "I reminded them who it's meant to protect." The range grew quiet again. As the veteran continued walking, memories surfaced, not painfully, but clearly. Faces of men who never grew old. Voices that ended mid-sentence. Lessons learned too late for some. He hoped these Marines would never need to learn them the hard way. One of the younger Marines called out, "Sir." The veteran stopped. "What's your name?" the Marine asked. The veteran turned slightly. "They used to call me Sergeant," he said. "That's enough." The Marines nodded, as if they had been given something sacred. The instructor watched the old soldier disappear beyond the fence line, feeling the weight of the day settle in his chest. Training schedules would continue. Weapons would be upgraded. Technology would advance. But something had shifted. Later that evening, the Marines cleaned their rifles in silence. Not the awkward silence of punishment, but the thoughtful silence of understanding. Each motion was slower, more deliberate. One Marine finally said, "He trusted that rifle more than we trust ours." Another replied, "He trusted himself." No one argued. Before lights out, the instructor posted the target in the barracks. A single clean hole in the center. No caption, no explanation. It didn't need one. Weeks later, those Marines would face tougher drills. Some would deploy, some would fail, some would lead, but none of them would ever again laugh at an old weapon or an older soldier, because they had learned something that couldn't be upgraded or replaced. Skill fades without discipline. Technology fails without judgment. And respect, once earned, never ages.